Boom. Oh, boom. There we go. And we're live. Hello and welcome everybody to the Wide World of Warhammer. With us today, we've got the young kids and the lads in the scene, the Zoomers of them all. We've got Nick in the top right. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great.
It's good. Do you love being called a Zoomer, I'm guessing? Just love it. Just being called young and all those jazz.
Oh, yeah, dude. I love being associated with, people like, that generation. It's great. Right on the cusp.
As well as we've got the big green orc man himself, Lukas Troller. How you doing, buddy?
It's me, dude, the war boss of the West. Unfortunately, we are missing our resident actual Zoomer, Tyler. Oh man, he's the youngest of us all, and it definitely shows.
Mate, when I think of someone who wears a fedora and got a beard and long hair, I'm like, absolute Zoomer for sure. Just
that's him. That's our boy, Tyler.
That's our boy. So, Nick and Lukas, for people who aren't aware, they run the Best in Tabletop TNG podcast. Sorry, Best in Faction TNG, Next Generation, apologies. And they're a bunch of young lads in the Pacific Northwest of the USA. So in the Northwest, as the name implies. So like Seattle, Oregon area for people who aren't educated in US geography. And they run an amazing podcast, been going over for a year or so. But these three lads, they all just went over to the WTC, so the World's Team Championship. So, but before you dive into things, so people who've never heard of you, so something unique, how long have you been playing 40K for? And like, yeah, give us a short, brief life story of how you got into 40K essentially and all that jazz.
Yeah. So I've been into 40K for many years. I had some friends at elementary school that actually introduced me to it, but was not able to afford any of the models. So basically just lovingly gazed at the pictures of orcs and necrons and tyranids for many, many years until like 2015 or so when I got into the game in 7th edition. Didn't really play competitively at all, just like grab my favorite models and push them around the table. And about in 2019, kind of in the middle of 8th edition, my friend Max and I in college decided to go join a competitive league at our local shop, Guardian Games, here in Portland, Oregon. And that was pretty much it. That was history from there. We went every week and played consistently for a year, took about a year off during COVID, and then came back in 2021 when Lukas and Tyler were like really getting into the tournament scene up here, and they just brought me along to tournaments and pretty much taught me everything that I know about competitive 40K from there. So yeah. So I've been playing competitively about, I guess, 2021, 22, and 23. So like 3-4 years. But I've been excited about 40K for a very long time. Been bouncing around a lot of different factions, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Doing all those fun things. So yeah, and I didn't realize you'd been playing competitively for that short of time. I thought you'd been playing for much longer, but there you go. Now we know. What do you generally like to play, Nick? For people who are unaware, like what's your vibe? What's like your favorite faction, and what's your vibe? Because I know Lukas the big green man and Tyler's a bugged boy, but like what's your love and passion in life, 40K wise?
Yeah.
Anyways.
I think when people think about me in 40K, they think a lot about Necrons because that is the faction I first got into the game with competitively. The funny story there was I had a bunch of Space Marines, as everyone does when they get into the game, and I found them extremely boring. And I found a local player who was willing to trade me, like, I don't know, 5,000 points of Necrons for like my 4,000 points of Space Marines. And we did that trade. And I very quickly learned that Necrons were not that good in 8th edition. And I just tried to make the best of a bad faction. And I had a lot of fun, like just trying out different builds, different lists, different units. And so I've always been returning to them throughout 9th edition, like when they get different buffs and that sort of thing. In our TNG group, I'm definitely known as the resident faction hopper or meta chaser. I bounced around between orcs. I played Votann when they came out. I actually won the best in faction Votann for the 2022 ITC year. And I've played a little bit of Marines when forced to for the team. But yeah, Necrons and mostly Xenos in general are kind of like my favorite army.
More than fair, more than fair. Look, someone has to be the person, right? But if you collect all the armies, are you really a meta hopper? Or are you just going back to an army that you once had? I mean,
exactly. One day I'll
big brain. That's a Gork rather than Mork, right? Is cunning but brutal?
I think Mork is the more cunning one.
Oh, Mork.
But I can never keep it straight, even after 12 years.
But yeah, so Lukas, so for people who have never heard of your big, beautiful green brain, what how long have you been playing 40K for? And then like what got you into it essentially?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Lucas. I've been into 40K now since middle school. That's like about 11 or 12 years old. I very distinctly remember kind of my introduction to 40K. I played Lord of the Rings miniature. I don't exactly know what the name of the game is, but the Lord of the Rings Games Workshop game for a while in elementary school. And then the friend who got me into that game started not playing so much Lord of the Rings and started playing Warhammer. And I very distinctly remember being in his living room and or his wherever it was, his living room, and he's like, yo, look at these crazy dudes, like look at these Imperial Guardsmen, they're so cool. And I'm like, ew, humans, lame. And then he's like, oh, look at these crazy robots, like the Necrons are so cool. Ew, humanoids, lame. And then eventually we got to the orcs, and I was just so excited to see like the something that's still called back to like the cool orcs of Lord of the Rings that I loved so much, but also like a different take on it. So I was instantly enamored with the orcs, and have played ever since. So I'm in my like 12th or 13th year of playing orcs. I play a couple other armies. I own a Chaos Knights collection. I'm starting to get into CSM. But orcs are my first and foremost love. And yeah, so I'm best known for being an orcs main, and ended up playing them at WTC this year, which is pretty cool. But yeah, in terms of my competitive side, I only really have been playing for the last maybe 2 or 3 years at anything approaching a decent competitive level. Tyler and I, who's the other, our third host of the TNG podcast, he and I went to college very close to each other. So that was kind of the moment where we both kind of came into the competitive scene together. We would go over to each other's dorms and play competitive games in our our lounges and that kind of thing. It was very fun to see everyone come by and be like, what is this game? It's kind of crazy. I think we've all had that experience at tournaments where someone comes by and is just so bewildered with what's going on, not really sure. But to see that among like lots of other people our age was fun as well. So yeah, that we started getting into the competitive scene together in our mid to late undergrad years, and then ever since then it's been what it's been. We've traveled more and more, and just been growing from there. It's been a lot of fun.
Hell yeah. And it's always great also when people come by and like start getting into 40K, they start admiring your models like, wow, you're painting these so well. And it's like, yes, I have painted these so well. They're not shit at all. You just don't know anything at all. But yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. You don't know it, but these are actually dog shit.
Absolutely.
Oh, shut up. Your models look great.
Thanks, buddy.
Yours models do look good. So, I mean, you have to be a real asshole to say, wow, your army looks like shit. But people's armies, I mean, we're just getting battle ready, right? Some people are like, on this cusp, but that's for another discussion another time to discuss all that jazz. So I guess the emphasis on today's show. So these young lads are part of, I guess, the new Team America. There you go. That's a tagline, the new Team America. So a bunch of young lads who are also in the young competitive journeys, traveling around the US today, just trying to dominate the West and then dominate further on to the Midwest and then the East. So taking on the world as well now. So wanted to get into understand a bit more about like what the process was for Team America at WTC, and then what the event was like, and then what the future looks like. Will team events actually take over the USA? I guess we'll find out. So starting with you, Nick. So what got you involved with the WTC or Team America to begin with? Like, had you heard about it previously, or like what got you involved? What was that process like in the very early stages?
Yeah. So I'm pretty good friends with Anthony Vanella, another well-known 40K player. And I just like kind of been talking to him a lot about like advice with certain lists. Like when I was playing Harlequins last year, I knew he was playing Harlequins at the same time. So he taught me a lot about like how to play pressure really well. He went to WTC last year, and when he came back from WTC, he like couldn't stop raving about it. He was like, it was the best event I've ever been to. Teams is great. Everyone should go play Teams. And I had the opportunity to go play at Las Vegas Teams tournament with a local store up here, Aegis Games, ran by Noah Badeau. He's like a well-known Imperial Knights player, great hobbyist. And they needed a 5th player for their team. And I was like, absolutely, that sounds like a great experience. So I went and had a ton of fun playing. And basically, when I was at that tournament, there was kind of a game there for me where an opponent of mine, I'd taken Assassinate, because he was like playing Blood Angels, right? He was playing an army, that runs his characters right at me. And I'm like, there's no way he wins this game if he doesn't use his characters. And at some point he realized he was going to lose. So he turns around and starts running away from me. And I was like, what are you doing? This isn't how you play 40K. What's happening? And I realized he's trying to just deny points from me. And that's basically when it clicked. I'm like, oh, this is like a totally different way of playing. He's trying to save the round for his team. He doesn't care about winning this game. He just cares about taking away as many points from me as possible. So playing like the rest of the tournament with that mentality, like less so about like, how do I win, but more like, how do I get points and deny points? It just was like, this is super fun. And hanging out with your 4 friends or your 7 friends all weekend and like trying to accomplish that goal together was great. So since then, I hit up Anthony and I was like, this is great. You're correct. Teams is like the absolute best. It's a blast. And he basically was like, I'm looking for a bunch of fresh, hungry, young players that like can be taught, you know, how to be like a part of a team. And that's when he reached out to like myself, and I'm sure Lukas will talk about this, Lukas as well. And he asked us if we wanted to be prospects for Team USA this year. So yeah, it's basically how I got involved. I absolutely was like, absolutely, dude. It wasn't like a guarantee like you're going to play, but it was like, you can come be a part of it and you can come help like practice and train with us and just learn a lot about teams. And that's without a doubt.
That's sort of Lukas, like similar sentiment, similar story. That's how you remember it when you were asked to join the cult that is Team USA, from the sounds of it, and Anthony was the preacher and the guru, allegedly.
Yeah, more or less. Anthony got basically all 3 of us in kind of more or less at the same time, around this time last year, actually. And since then, it's just been working with the team. Yeah. So, you know, it was kind of strange that we were chosen given our complete lack of team's experience, but I'm very glad we were, and it's been great ever since.
I mean, you got to get some newbies into the cult eventually. So, I mean, you got to grow the cult eventually, go from there, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you got a Jesus-like figure in Sean Naden. So, I mean, I'm not trying to make the analogies, but I mean, maybe. No.
It's not Jesus-like, man. He is 40K Jesus.
True. That is very, very fair. So, what was this process like? So, how long? So, obviously, Las Vegas teams, you sort of got the initial idea for you, Nick. But, like, what was this process and what was involved in, I guess, the team building process? Because I know there's a bunch of prospects as well as existing people who played. Maybe Lukas, you can elaborate more. What was this process like? What did you guys just go kumbaya and like have team meetings, or what did you do?
Yeah, it was a bit of all the above. For those who are unaware, we kind of had a bit of Team USA restructuring over the course of the last year. There was a lot of stuff that was working well, but a lot of stuff that, you know, kind of needed to be revisited and could be further refined to reflect the more experienced model that the Europeans had built. So Anthony's kind of vision and a lot of my understanding anyway, from someone who's only been on the team for a year, was Anthony's vision and the vision of the other higher ups on the team was to kind of reforge it to follow along with the excellent example that, you know, the Australian team and the European teams have all shown works very well for the WTC in the past. You know, there was kind of always the stereotype that the US team is a team of a bunch of singles players who come together and just play their individual games and hope it works out. And Anthony and the others realized that, you know, having a bunch of strong singles players has its merits, and there can be a lot of good that comes from that. But you also want to forge them into a team at the end of the day, because otherwise, you know, you can take advantage of like some of the weaknesses of just having a bunch of people who play their own game. So there was a lot of that kind of mindset going in. So around this time last year, we knew that we were there was going to be some restructuring. There was going to be some, let's just figure this out as we go. So, you know, we didn't start. Well, we had a pool of prospects who were all in. We were playing practice games with each other. We were scrimming against other nations over the course of the last year. But it was really, I would say, in like April or May where we really started winnowing out, like, let's, you know, the people who have really been doing well and showing up all the time, you know, going to the weekly practice meetings and showing up, performing well and being involved in the conversation. Let's, like, you know, keep those in a pool, and then we can kind of audition from there. So yeah, that's kind of the story of when things got started. Last May was kind of when, you know, our roster really started getting winnowed down to, you know, further and further from there. But it was kind of fun having a whole year-long process. My understanding in the past for Team USA was that, you know, Sean and the others would kind of pick the team fairly early on, and then they would go to some regular, monthly meetings, but there wouldn't be that much scrimmages or working together, the kind of thing. Nick says, "Wow, I agree wholeheartedly." But yeah, it would just be like, in the summer they would go do some practices and meet up and do some talking, and then it would be just like straight to the WTC from there, and they do most of their prep actually at the event. So it was kind of fun to experience a more year-long pattern, a year-long cycle where you're doing things with the team all the way through, and I think that really worked out well for us and was a big part of our success, and I think we're going to be doing that again this year. So I know that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so I just want to unravel that a bit more. So heading over to you, Nick. So these international scrims, like, what the hell are they? Like, what happens in these situations? Like, I know they don't obviously look. You guys are a landlocked country, like with Canada, but like, so how do you scrim against people from Poland and other parts of Europe? So maybe Nick, you can answer. And like, what that process is like? Is it just the best 8 play against the best 8, or what happens?
Yeah. So these started off pretty early. This was actually the first WTC terrain game I played was in a international scrim against Team Sweden. Basically, it was like someone on our team, whether it be Anthony, whether it be John, whether it be, they would reach out to the captain of another team and go, "Hey, would you guys like to do a practice scrimmage? Like, the time is like these 2 weeks or these 3 weeks. Everyone needs to get their games in by this day." And they would join a meeting. It was a meeting that was open, like it was on Discord. So if anyone was free, they could participate in the pairings process. And basically they would pick the first 8 people that signed up. And we would just get our pairings and be told, here's who you're playing against, here's their Discord handle, organize a game on Tabletop Simulator, submit it. So yeah, it was super fun. The time difference was definitely something to figure out. Us being on the West Coast, we're like 9+ hours ahead or behind everyone over in Europe. So it was a lot of, do you want to play super late at night or do you want to play super early in the morning? But yeah, I had a lot of fun games playing till like 1 a.m. or waking up at like 7 a.m. on a weekend to, play with a very nice Swedish man. So yeah.
Yeah. So who are some countries that you had the chance to scrim against? So talk about Sweden, but I understand like, was it Poland? What were some others?
Yeah, I personally played against Sweden a bunch. Northern Ireland. I know that we had a scrim against Poland. We had a scrim against Greece. We've had a scrim against Netherlands. We had a few into Canada as well. I'm sure Luke. Oh, Scotland played against them. Yeah.
Yeah. The big couple were like we played against Sweden several times. I think the only other team we played more than once was Canada, and Canadians they were definitely, I mean, it helps that they are most in line with our time zones. So it was also very good to be able to work with them in terms of like, internal testing. Once 10th edition came out, it was like we were sharing a lot of ideas and scrimming a lot and bouncing a lot of games back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, yeah, like Lucas was saying too, as we got closer and closer to the event, our roster started getting like, we know these are the people who are going to be starting. Like, we know that these people are like people that we're considering. So what they would do is they started like assigning people. Like, we want like a few like players who we know are going to be starting with a few people that we want to see, and we want you guys to play in the scrim. And then the next one was like, okay, you 8 play in the scrim. So it wasn't just like the first 8 mad dash to sign up. We did try to equalize it so that everyone got equal amounts of practice time and playing time.
Yeah, sure. Understood. That makes complete sense. And look, I echo, time zones are weird. They suck so much. It's like, oh, what's the time? Oh yeah, 5 a.m. Cool. That's fun. That is so much fun. It's all good. But yeah, it happens. We do it for our stupid 40K hobby sometimes to make it work, right? So obviously you guys have played in team events and events in the past in the Pacific Northwest, but like, what were some of the biggest learning things you found in this environment of Team USA? Was there, or just playing against Europeans, obviously, who have maybe a different approach to the game? Maybe Lucas, you can answer first, and then Nick can step in.
Yeah, I would say kind of the biggest couple things, the steepest part of the learning curve was just kind of harkening back to what Nick initially said about, his first couple teams experiences, was just how differently people take the game. We're very used to, I'd played years and years of singles events, And it was like a complete mentality shift to think about, there are going to be some matchups, there are going to be some situations. Your coach might come to you in the middle of a game and say, we need you to adjust your play patterns right now, because we need you to fill this role. We need you to get these points. We need you to make sure you lock down this number of victory points this game, that kind of thing. It's just such a different mentality shift. And for those who haven't played in a team event, it's definitely very unique and different. We'll talk a little bit more about like my game specifically at the WTC a little later, but it was definitely strange. I'm someone who kind of once he started playing the game, I'm very locked in. I'm very cut off. I just want to like pay attention to what's going on at the table, and it was definitely very different for me to have to retune into what was going on with the rest of the team. What are my coaches need from me at this moment? So it was definitely a bit of a learning curve for me to kind of have to be able to tune out of the game for a second and pay attention to what's going on with the greater team. So, it seems very obvious moving from singles to teams that you have to pay attention to that kind of stuff, but it is just so different. That's the biggest thing for me. Also, the Europeans, of course, they're a more teams-oriented environment over there. For them, like all their teams players are very accustomed to that at this point. So it was definitely cool to be able to watch and learn and see how they did those things. Especially like, once we got to round 5 and 6 and like our opponents got really, really tough, to see how my opponents handled like, coaches coming up to them and asking them questions and those interactions. I learned a lot about how I should be interacting with my coach, that kind of thing, because it was my first time. I really had no idea. It was very cool to see.
That's more than fair, and it makes complete sense. Nick, anything you want to add there about like things you learned along the way, or learned being in that training camp of Team USA?
Yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, definitely like thinking about teams is a different mentality than trying to play a singles game. I think a lot of big stuff too. Like a lot of things when I heard about teams was all like, oh, like you get to pick your matchups, like attacker, defender, all that sort of stuff. And that's true to some extent. But kind of just like the whole like list design step. Like I learned a lot about like, you don't just get to go, this is mine, I guarantee playing against this. So if you try to like design like a counter list or something like that, you need to consider that you might never get the matchup you're trying to counter. So like you should probably build something that can handle a few different lists. Also too, like in the list construction phase, one of my biggest going from mostly player place terrain up here and in the US to complete fixed terrain format, thinking about like terrain a lot more when you're designing a list was a very big lesson to learn. There's a lot of, I know WTC has a lot of like crates, a lot of impassable pieces. So that was a really fun thing to have to consider in my list building, rather than just being able to kind of pick and choose exactly where my terrain goes, which I'm honestly, frankly, over. So yeah, those are for me.
You could save your brain now, Nick, to actually play in the game instead of having to position the terrain as well and build the games beforehand. It's amazing. And look, now we start with the Nova Ls, then the WTC Ls, and now we have the Super L. So we're moving onwards and upwards. Hell yeah, baby. Mm-hmm. So you just not touched on there, Nick, about designing lists and tailoring lists. So I wanted to actually unpack this a bit more, because obviously, so we'll refer to it a bunch. So TNG boys, they obviously have their own podcast and YouTube channel, and they recently did one mostly about Lucas's journey at the WTC. So unpacking each game and all that jazz, which we'll touch on a little bit, but not go in depth. So definitely watch that for there. But as part of that episode, you guys talked about how you designed this orc list, and I wanted to understand more. As well as the orc list, you designed obviously a bunch of other lists along the way. What was this tailoring process like for you? Like, what was the initial idea? Obviously, what was the initial idea, and then like, so how did you test and keep it going? Like, was there a bunch of refinement along the way? Like, I wanted to understand what that process looked like. Maybe, Lucas, obviously, you can answer it.
You want me to specifically tackle the orc list, or you just talk?
Sure. Just about... no, in general, like you refer to the orc list. I mean, you just slid into Sean's DMs and just like stole it quickly, and you're like, "Yep, this works," or like, what happened?
Well, really, with the so when you're building a WTC list, there's a couple of things in mind. I would say, the first thing you should always think about is how it fits into the team structure. Like, where is it going to slot in attacker, defender wise? What are its good matchups? What are its bad matchups? And also, how is it going to score its points? So I would say that basically other than like the couple of obvious lists, it's like Eldar are amazing, GSC are amazing. We should probably have both of those in our roster just because we're kind of trolling if we don't. All of our other lists were like, this fills a specific role in the team, and here are how it's going to get its points. For example, John's Custodies list, I think, is a great example. We very often would use that as a first defender, throw it down, say, we're going to pick our table. We're going to get X number of points regardless of the matchup you give us. And like that's the role it filled in the team. It was the first defender. It was the stable points getter, no matter what you threw at it. So like that was one role. And then there was also Harpster's Grey Knights, where this is something that it doesn't have to go down to a particular point in the pairings process, but once it's down, it can kind of select the matchup that it also finds kind of stable. It can play very tricksy, so it's very good at denying enemy points and not giving them openings to blow it out. The Grey Knights basically never lost a game by a wide margin, and that's a really powerful ability to have. Like we can always rely on them getting 6 or 7 points or something like that, unless they have a god awful matchup like GSC, which we just won't pick. So that was Grey Knight's role, is to make it into the scrum, to get a matchup where you can always get 8 to 12 points and then always get those 8 to 12 points. With specific regard to the orc list, I can't really take much credit for it. Sean basically wrote the list from the ground up, and then at the time that was his list because he had created it. He had played a bunch of games with it. He's doing very well in our internal and external testing, and I was playing like kind of a mix of Imperial Knights and Necrons at the time. And so this was kind of the point in the team where I was struggling a little bit and not really sure what I was going to play and what was going to fulfill a good role in the team. And as soon as Sean came up with the orc list, I started playing games with it immediately. And he realized this would probably be good for me to figure out something else to play. And Lukas can play orcs, A, because he's very experienced with it, and B, because he's very excited about it. So that's the point at which I kind of took over the orc list, and then Sean and I worked in conjunction with each other to end up with the final product. So what we actually played at WTC was very similar to what we initially created on paper, like our very first iteration of the list. Its role was to also kind of fall out in the scrum, the scrum, which is, for those unfamiliar with the term, is kind of the 4v4 set of matchups that kind of resolve at the end. So like you put down your first defender, they put down their first defender, they get paired. That's 2 matchups. You put down your second defender, they put down their second defender, they get paired. That's 2 more matchups. So now there's a 4v4 left. That 4v4 is what Team America likes calling the scrum. It's kind of just like a messy brawl of 4 armies going at each other. So the orcs very often made it to that point and would try to get a matchup like Necrons or GSC, where like activation locking and primary control and tagging were all really important because they're effective ways to counter Necrons and GSC. And then once you get those matchups, you kind of just like lock those down and get some good points, whereas other armies might not actually do well than Necrons or GSC. So yeah, that was kind of the idea with the list. And I think maybe we changed it no more than 100 to 200 points from Sean's initial conception of it to what we actually played at WTC. I think we maybe moved around a couple of small trash units. I threw in 3 custom mega cannons. He had like some tractor cannons or something like that. It's just like very small shifts. The whole idea was just, we want a bunch of trash. It's going to score its points by always taking fixed. It's always going to have good primary control. And as long as it can dodge some sketchy matchups like Knights and Custodies, it's never really going to lose a game. It could lose a game, but it's never going to get blown out. So that was the idea.
Huh, makes sense. And we have Nic in the chat, not Nic in the show, but he's actually curious to also ask Ian to make deep dive a bit more. So what units didn't make the cut when you considered orcs? Like I know obviously you had like Sean had a list concept per se, like how the list was going to play, but did you try like maybe some other lists on the way which had some various orc units? Obviously in this, it's a singles environment, and some teams environment is more like a old school orcs, like the Green Wire push, or like Screen Cocker Boys and Beast Snagger Boys with Mozrog and stuff like that. But like, curious to hear what you guys tested and if there's anything you'd change after your experience.
Yeah, a couple of units that we tried but ended up not needing. The first one, which was in the list, which I actually just forgot, it was most of the points that ended up leaving were in Warbikers. Warbikers have assault weapons, so they're very good for moving very quickly and then doing an action across the board. But but they are 75 points, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in the context of orcs, that is actually quite a bit. It's like a truck and a half. So we ended up cutting the Warbikers. They were there to do actions and screen. And then what we realized was the list still has 29 units and it has 9 vehicles, all of which want to be doing actions. So we didn't need more action doers. They were completely redundant. So the Warbikers were something that we tried initially and ended up cutting basically immediately. Other units that we were trying, for a while, we had not Mozrog. We tried Mozrog for a couple of games, but he just wasn't worth the points. Oh my God, what's his name? Zodgrod Wartsnaga, the guy who joins the big squad of Gretchen. That unit was really cool. For those who never played against it, it was there was a weird wording which made it toughness 5 in melee, and Zodgrod gave it -1 to wound. So this unit was actually very tough and resilient in melee, and it scouted 9 inches. So you could use it to take an early board position, get some extra CP with the Gretchen ability, and then kind of like flood the opponent, tag their important units with garbage Gretchen. Who cares if they die? It'll take 2 or 3. It'll take a turn or 2. And then by that point, you've just flooded them with so much stuff that it doesn't matter. And the Gretchen are super cheap. So if they die to something random, it doesn't really matter. Unfortunately, the weird wording that made them toughness 5 in melee got removed. I mean, that was kind of a rules like writing mistake by GW anyway, is my impression of it. So they got rid of that. And that made that unit no longer takeable because it could actually be killed in melee very quickly. So we ended up cutting that unit out as well, which was sad. But they ended up no longer making the cut. We tried to find... Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was going to say, poor Gretchen. Like, they didn't deserve this. They were so fun to play around with. That Zogrod unit was just dumb, but it was so fun.
That unit was cool. It was always a bit of a trip, like tell my opponent, just so you know, I can go like 40 inches on turn 1. And they're like, oh, that's scary. I better stay away. And I'm like, okay, they're running away from my Gretchen. Very cool. I'll take the whole board. Thank you very much. Something to say, Nick?
I'll say after all that effort too. After all that effort, we went to get Zodrog for you as well. Just ends up on the cutting floor.
Yeah, sad.
Oh, for a future meta, right? Just pre-planning for the next meta, Zodrog meta, baby.
Exactly.
So I wanted to also understand. So you talked about like tailoring, tinkering now. So we talked about a bunch of orc lists. And I'll head over to you, Nick. So what was this tailoring and testing process like? So I know during the TNG podcast, you guys talked about how, like, Lukas initially, he ran like headfirst into the GSC matchup a bunch to learn it and understand it. But like, or maybe on first impression, it would be very easy to say, look, I think this orc list does counter GSC. But then the first initial games, like, I just get fucked by GSC essentially. It's like, well, it obviously doesn't counter. But then you guys actually worked it out and worked out the kinks. So I want to understand maybe a bit more of how did you guys plan this and like work it out with other lists and armies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, Lukas definitely knows a lot more about this, and I'll pass it back to him in a second. But like Sean initially came up with the concept of like trying to activation lock GSC because GSC have like no way to fall back and do anything. So he was like, maybe this is a GSC counter, maybe this is a Necron counter, because Necrons have a really hard time doing actions in melee, like unless it's like a Tan, and the Lich Guard have a really mediocre damage profile into trucks. So that was one matchup they assigned for me and Lukas to figure out, since I was like the resident Necron expert. A lot of the lists were kind of just like auto include, like GSC and like Eldar very strong. I know the NIDS list in particular that Sean came up with. He did a lot of playtesting with Tyler to try to see if that could like stop GSC and how it could do so. And yeah, it's a lot of like what you're saying is like, okay, on paper, these like profiles, these abilities, they seem good into stopping this army. But it was a lot of having to play, messing up, realizing your mistake, going back and kind of just like getting to the point where you could play perfectly. Because you can't just like put the list down on the table and instantly counter one of the best armies in the game. So yeah.
Sure, that makes sense. Lukas, anything you want to add on there?
Yeah, specifically with regard to the orcs, since I don't think I actually stated kind of why this works in a GSC on our podcast. More or less what you do is you, like Nick was saying, GSC don't have any way to fall back and do anything. So their aberrants can't fall back and charge. Their, bomb squads and neophytes are both super prone to being tagged. So if you have a bunch of garbage units that you're fine losing, it's very easy to just tag them, lock them down. Tagging also prevents them from returning to the shadows. So you don't even necessarily want to kill them because then they come back to life. But if you just tag them, then they stay on the board. You know, you make sure they don't walk on an objective with a consolidate, and then they're just sitting there for an entire turn. So doing that in combination with neutering their drop turn basically by using transports and all of the ruins to just dodge their shooting really effectively, makes the GSC alpha not nearly as important or impactful. You know, they drop in, they kill 20 boys and 4 trucks. Awesome. That was 250 points. Good job, kind of thing. So just blunting that was kind of the whole idea that Sean had. And it also works in the Necrons, right? Like you shoot your big Doomsday Cannon. It killed 1 truck. Awesome. Your Lich Guard never gets to fight my boys because I'm faster than you. They're just going to stay in combat with trucks for the whole game. And that was kind of the idea is, you know, with such a lethal addition, don't give your opponent anything worthwhile to kill. Just give them a whole bunch of garbage. And by the end of the game, you'll have gotten the points that you want to get.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And so yeah, that sounds like you had like a bit of like a long process here. So I also understand you guys had like training weekends. So as well as obviously these international scrims and like the Kumbaya Discord sessions, you guys had training weekends at Sean's house. Like what was the purpose of that? So I know prior to this sub, you guys played some practice games, and like when 10th edition dropped, obviously it was a holy crap moment and everyone had to get together and understand some things. But I know also post list submission, you guys had some boot camps essentially. So maybe Nic, could you answer like what went on during those days? Like what was the format and the process?
Yeah, definitely. We had 2 practice weekends scheduled. We had one right before list submission, which was for people to go in like last minute test lists. And we had one right after list submission, which was to basically let's play what we have into what we know we're going to go up against, and just try to see if there's any like weird hidden tech in these lists. We went to the second practice weekend just because that's how it worked out with our travel dates. Traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast is a bit of a lengthy travel. So we ended up going there and then going straight from there to Europe. But while we were there for the weekend, it was basically, well, one, it was a great way to just meet people face to face. I know that Sean is like really big on how Team USA is part of this like community building, organization. Like it's not, he's like really wants it to be not just this kind of hidden away thing. He wants it to kind of be like open and get people to, on the team to care about it, and people outside of the team to kind of care about it and want to be a part of it and want to support it. So it was really nice getting to meet people face to face for the first time and kind of building some of that team camaraderie. But pretty much my role the whole weekend was taking any Necrons list that anyone wanted to practice against and putting it on a table, like putting out a mission that we thought we'd play against that team. Like a lot of like Denmark, for example, we knew we were going to play them round 3. So we're like, cool, we can play them on a table of round 3 and test against their lists. And Australia's Necrons list was another one. We're like, okay, we might play them out of pods, so we could play them like round 4, 5, 6, or 7. So we'll just pick one of those missions randomly and like test and see how it works. And it was a lot of just testing, okay, me going first, them going first, like pressure, like from both sides, like defensive from both sides, just to kind of see like weak points, strong points, average score, that sort of thing. So I played Necrons into Lukas a lot. I played Necrons into Anthony a lot. I played Custodes into Sean a lot. So I pretty much was just everyone's punching bag for the weekend, but it was super fun. Like working those matchups out and being able to go from like, okay, let's like take this from like a 12 to like a 14 and so on and so forth.
I feel you, buddy. I was as much as a punching bag Custodes can be, I was the Custodes punching bag in the lead up for WTC Australia. So there's a couple of practice weekends at Simon's house with William and Alex Terrison, so the Frenchie, and like it was the punching bag for a couple of them, testing out John Lennon's list and like Portugal's and Belgium's list. So I understand what you mean, and I get it. So Lucas, like with these games and stuff like that, so will you guys try and play full games? I imagine not. Maybe it's a bit of a redundant question. Or were you guys just testing specific scenarios and just getting a feel for what it's like on the table?
It's a little bit, a little bit of all of the above. If I'm being honest, there is a little bit of philosophy difference. You know, some people really value re-racking games quickly, just getting a feel for it, and that has a lot of merits. But it also has its downsides, right? There's is also a lot of value in playing a full game out. Something crazy might happen on turn 4 that you didn't expect, or the game might get so watered down. You know, you've got 2 units and a character, random character left on turn 4. They've got 3 units and a transport, and like those dynamics of understanding how to play those late game situations are also really important. So it was a little bit of both. A lot of games that we wanted to play all the way through, like for example, the GSC game is very important to play all the way through if you're practicing against GSC because they have so much late game strength. If you re-rack on turn 3, unless you're like basically tabled and the game is over, if you re-rack on turn 3, you're losing a lot of valuable information. And you're not going to know how to play the late game. Whereas, you know, if your opponent, one of the example games that we played at Sean's house was I played into Tim Pinney's Chaos Knights, which was something I'm like, yeah, this is probably pretty bad. I've got a couple of like, night killing ability. I could probably deny their primary enough. It's probably not too bad, but let's just see what it is. I need to know if it's an orange or a red, right? I need to know if I'm going to get 5 points or if I'm going to get 1. And I'm very glad we played that game. That was a game that we re-racked on turn 2 because it was over immediately. This is a horrible matchup for orcs, right? Like if the Chaos Knights, even if they go second, if they just move on to all the objectives, how am I going to deal with OC48? Like I can only kill 1 war dog at a time. And then that's basically all I can do is kill like 1 war dog with the Beast Boss squad, 1 war dog with another Beast Boss squad, and that's it. So that was a very important game to play, and we only had to play 2 turns before re-racking because we learned the dynamics immediately. So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of, if the game is over, if you've learned what you need to learn, then re-rack. But if you haven't done that, and especially if things are still up in the air, the score is close, someone could come back, it's important to also play out the game so you understand the late game dynamics.
Yeah, sure. So were people also like monitoring your games and reporting back things, or like communicating, say you should have done this or this, and like providing suggestions, or was it just you and whoever your opponent was just going through and talking through the motions?
It was mostly just us and our opponent. We did have I think there was an odd number of players there, if I recall correctly. So there was kind of an odd man out who would kind of rotate between all the tables and just kind of like look and see what was going on. Be like, oh, this looks good for X person. Did you guys consider this? Like, do you think this game could have gone differently if you played more passively or aggressively? That person was very helpful because it, was a third party. It injected some new ideas that no one really thought of into how the matchup was going. And if that really changed how we thought about the matchup, then we would just re-rack and try again. But yeah, it was mostly just you and your opponent. I know Tyler and I, for example, no one really, other than Sean coming in and suggesting a few ideas, no one really understood the GSE and Orcs matchup like Tyler and I did. I think we played it maybe like 7 or 8 times before WTC. So I had a really good grasp on how it went. And so we just kind of like hunkered down in our corner of the basement and played that like 3 times over the course of the weekend. And that was really helpful.
Yeah, is that similar to what you found, Nick, for your games? Or what, because you're testing other lists, do you have people monitoring more or have like a different experience?
Yeah, like Lucas said, whenever there was an odd player out, they would bounce around between the tables and just see what was going on. I remember Lucas and I had a really fun evening the last evening we were there, I think Sunday. Everyone had left except Lucas and myself and Sean. And Sean basically just kind of hung out with us as Lucas and I played the Necron matchup back and forth a few times. And Sean would just like kind of pause and be like, what if you tried this? Or like, what if we did this here or deployed this instead? So it was a lot of like the 3 of us trying to solve this matchup together and like trying to optimize how many points we could get out of it. And so that was a super fun experience, just like kind of zeroing in on one matchup in particular. So
yeah,
also kind of, cool. If I can throw one other thing in, Sam, sorry. Yeah, especially with regard to Necrons, because a lot of we saw some variation in like Eldar and GSC lists over the course of WTC that changed things a little bit, but Necrons were definitely one army where, other than the core of like everyone basically had 20 Lich Guard and a Catan, at that point it's like, what's the rest of the list? And what the rest of the list is really changes how you play it, right? Like, for example, my list doesn't mind seeing a bunch of trash units all over the place, but it really hates seeing 3 Locust Heavy Destroyers with the anti-infantry gun. Changes that matchup from like an expected 12 to 15 points into like a 8 to 10 points because they just kill 20 boys a turn every single turn, and then I'm out of stuff by turn 3 or 4 or whatever it is. So understanding those little changes were really important, and that we unpacked a lot of those at the team weekend, which is why they're so important, right? Like Nick would understand what those units do and why they're important and what role they fill in certain matchups. And he could tell us, you need to be careful of this unit. So you're a little bit more scared of Denmark's Necron list. Whereas England, I don't think they had Necrons, but I know Poland did. It's like Poland doesn't have this in their Necron list, so you can really exploit that and look to take advantage of it. So that was really important, and that's why having so many like faction specialists at these practice weekends is such an amazing thing.
Yeah, makes complete sense. So following from this like practice weekend you guys alluded to before is you went over to Europe, and you went over actually a bit earlier than I guess most people did, and I had some time in Europe. So what did you guys get up to in Europe? Where did you go? Maybe just for maybe some sightseeing, or was there some on the ground espionage trying to figure out some stuff beforehand?
None of that. No espionage. Like I said, when we flew over to practice weekend on like July 30th, July 29th, we realized it would just be more cost effective to just fly straight from there to Europe rather than fly all the way back home and then fly all the way back out. So we decided, all right, we're already paying a ridiculous amount of money for a plane ticket, so let's just make a vacation out of it. And we all picked like some places we wanted to see. And I think our first stop was Frankfurt, Germany. And we hung out there for a few days. And then from there, we went to Amsterdam for like 2 days. And then we made our way down to Mechelen. And Tyler and I played in War Masters, and then team started. So that was pretty much what happened.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's fun.
Did you get some performance enhancing drugs in Amsterdam, or decline to comment?
No, Amsterdam was a lot more relaxed. Our journey from Frankfurt to Amsterdam, we talked about it a little bit. The train situation getting there was a bit of a nightmare. We could have booked like a direct train from Frankfurt to Amsterdam, but it was like, I don't know, something like 180 euros, something crazy. And we were like, oh, here's one with 2 transfers for like 50 euro. Like, sounds great. Sounds way better. And the first train was great, just straight where we needed to go. The second train showed up a little late, had a ridiculous amount of people on it, stopped randomly like every 5 minutes, and ended up getting us late to our next train by like, I don't know, 45 minutes. It was something super long. So we were all super delayed. And then everyone else was super delayed trying to get onto that train. And so we finally got to Amsterdam like 2-3 hours late, and we're all super tired and exhausted. So our first day there, we actually just kind of relaxed. We stayed in a little hotel that was a little bit outside of Amsterdam just because it was cheaper. And so we decided to tour some of like the little towns around there. Tyler and I did. There's like these like cool like little fishing towns. We went and saw like all the touristy sites. Like went to a cheese factory. Tried like fried fish and all that stuff. And then the day after that, when we had rested, we were like, all right, let's go explore Amsterdam. But it was just exploring by day. So it was a lot of like checking out museums and wandering around. Unfortunately, the one day we went there, it was downpouring. So there wasn't really a lot of outdoor activities that we participated in. But Tyler and I did have probably my favorite meal of the trip. We went to a local brewery there per the recommendation of Dick van der Haars from Team Netherlands. I knew he was from there, and I was like, hey, can you got any recommendations? So he told us about this great brewery, and we had a fabulous meal, all the various meats and various beers, and yeah, it was great.
Hell yeah. Get some strip waffles also in there. Oh, that's so good.
I did get one of those. Yeah, there's a picture of me smiling and eating one. Yep.
Oh, of course you're gonna be smiling. I mean, you weren't just smiling from the strip waffles, I'm sure. But we'll leave that to the side. Let the audience pick up the pieces from there. But no, Lucas is dying on screen for people who aren't aware. So, so from there, obviously, you talked about travel to Mechelen. So was there, and you had the War Master. So Nick, you had the pleasure and privilege to participate in the War Masters. For people unaware, Team USA philosophy is playing members no bueno around War Masters. Not allowed. You got to protect. Oh, sorry, you're not prevented, but kind of prevented. Anyways, so Nick, what was that War Masters experience like? So obviously, first time playing, I imagine, in Europe like that, and in like a different environment. What was that like? And like maybe you could recount your experience. Yeah, for us.
Yeah, War Masters was really fun. I like how right from the get-go, it was a very serious tournament. Like you had to get models approved. You had to get you could ask questions ahead of time to the judges. Obviously the WTC rules pack is very extensive, and it is like well kept. I know you've heard about us in our show and probably many other shows about how the judging staff there was amazing. But I loved how consistent they were. And so going in and knowing like how professional of an event it was, just like made me feel very happy. The tournament itself, it was really cool. Like I played against some people from teams. Like there's a player from Team Austria there that I played against. And I actually round one played against Alex Taus from Team New Zealand. Yeah. I played against a guy from
just
Team
the worst.
Czechia, and then other people. There were like some people I played against who were just like, we're just fans of teams, and we just came here to play. So, yeah, it was cool playing these people. In a singles tournament with differential scoring, there's still a little bit of that kind of teams mentality. Like if you're losing, you're like, I can still play for a tie because that like means something. But there isn't as much that team's mentality of like, I'll just lose by a little bit, because like you still do want to win to progress in the bracket. So yeah,
of course. And I believe you took custodes as well. And like, how'd you end up in the end?
I didn't do super great. Unfortunately, I wasn't really able to practice that custodes list after locking it in, because most of my practice time after that was people asking for Necrons practice and practice into other custodes lists that were way different than mine. So most of the tournament was me showing up and being like, all right, I have never played this matchup on this table. Time to figure it out live. And a lot of the people there are really good at Warhammer. It was definitely one of the higher level like competition events that I played against. A lot of the events up here locally, there's maybe like 2-3 games where I play against someone who like has another like good shot at winning the tournament and like knows everything in my lists and like aren't surprised by anything and knows their list inside and out. And it's like a real good competitive game. And pretty much every game at War Masters was, they were like, I know exactly what your army does. I know exactly what my army needs to do into yours. Let's play. So that was super fun. I ended up going like 2-3-1. I had 2 games immediately into Knights, which is a tough matchup for me. I haven't really figured that one out quite so much. It was kind of a lot of like going forward and then dice spiking and just like losing 15 custodians and being like, oh, all right, well, that's it. So yeah, I had a very fun game into CSM where it was like an 11-9, and then he like flipped capture enemy outpost in the last turn and landed a 9-inch charge. I'm like, no. So he got the 11-9. But yeah, learned a lot, had a good time, met a lot of great people. It was fun.
And you met Taus as well, so which is
I mean that goes fine, you know.
He's just a southern regen of Lucas Troller, right? Just a tall, lanky fucker, and he's there. But no, and like to touch on the Imperial Knight thing, like it's super terrain dependent and it's weird as hell. Like Will Milton and I ran that matchup like a bunch of times, and it really depends on the terrain and mission and if you can stage or not. But we could deep dive Golden Boy tactics later, so all good. But like during the event, so something that happened as well, like talking about regens, and maybe Lucas, you can describe this image, is we saw some 3 tallish, like long-haired motherfuckers, and they looked very similar. Like, maybe describe this image and like what was this all about?
So, if I recall correctly, this image was prompted by one of the, I don't know if it was judges or streaming staff, but in round
Adam Kamalinsky, Adam Camilleri.
Okay, excellent. Yes. So Adam suggested. Okay, hold on. I'm getting excited. I need to back up. So in round, I think it's 5 of War Masters, Tyler plays against Arna from Team Germany, playing Chaos Knights, and immediately the stream is laughing at the fact that they look like long lost brothers, with both of them having the rather long hair. So they go and find the other very long-haired individual from, I believe it's Team Austria. I forget. I don't know. I've never met this person, so I don't know what his name is. Is it Stefan?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, anyway, so they find, we'll call him Stefan. I believe his name is Stefan. And Adam suggests they all do the meme of all the spider people, the Spider-Men pointing at each other, being like, no, it's you. No, it's you. It's you. And so they're all, standing in a triangle pointing at each other. This is Tyler, Stefan, and Arna, all pretending to be each other because they all look alike, which was just hilarious.
Yeah, I think what made it also great, like I was there watching live, and Tyler and Arna started playing, is those two just like got on like a house on fire. Like they were the exact, very similar personalities. It's like my god, these people are just, it was hilarious. So it was too good. But was it funny to you guys? Would you make the connection also? It's like, oh, that's funny. That looks like a long lost Tyler. Nick, looks like you can answer.
Yeah, I remember finishing my round 5 game and walking over to like see how Tyler was doing. And I see he's on stream and I'm like, oh, very cool. So I walk over and I pause for a second. I'm like, why are there 2 Tylers at the stream table? Like, what's going on? And Erica Forsman from our team, he walked in to like, check out the event. He was like, hey, Nick, nice to meet you. Yada, yada. And he looks over and he's like, so what's going on here? And I'm like, dude, I have no idea. I'm like, I guarantee you, because like Tyler had his hair down for most of the event and now his hair's tied back in a ponytail and his hat's gone. I'm like, I guarantee you that Tyler showed up to the table, saw Arne, and was like, oh yeah, dude, let's do this, ties his hair up, and like, that's it. So it was very funny watching the 2 of them, like similar mannerisms, like, yeah, like playing their game. It looked like a fun time.
And then he gets shit on by Chaos Knights. Some things never change.
That looked like less of a fun time.
Yeah.
Come on, Tyler. What are we doing here, buddy? Well, he'll get there eventually. That's why he just couldn't join the show. He just got shit on too badly. But no,
Still recovering.
Still recovering. Too good. So yeah. So I guess one of the questions we alluded to before is, so you guys were on the team with Sean. So Sean was his the captain and stuff like that. So what was the experience like as Sean and as team captain? I know you guys had like Team USA dinners and stuff like that. So maybe Lucas, you can touch on first. What's it like being led by a Sean team, and like what does it look like generally?
Sean is definitely a really fun person to play 40K with. Because we lived on more or less opposite side of the country, I'd never interacted with him, like spoken to him, or I had like seen him play on stream a couple times, but I had never like had a conversation with him before we started doing Team USA stuff together. So having him on the team was really fun. He definitely has his own very unique way of playing Warhammer. Tyler tells the story way better than I do, but part of the role of coaches is going and checking with players and seeing how their game is going. So John has a very particular way he plays Warhammer. Also has a very unique way of expressing how his game is going. So the way Tyler describes this is, he'll walk up to the table, ask Sean how the game is going, and Sean will never communicate with the coach. He'll just like do a little dance, right? Like he'll like shake his hips around. And if he does like a big boogie, a big dance, then the game's going great. You're going to get at least, 12 to 14 points at the very least. But if he's more like subdued, if he's doing a little, back and forth, then maybe we're looking more like a tie, 8 to 12, something like that. And so like communicating with Sean via dance was like an important thing that our coaches needed to learn, apparently. But yeah, he's got his very own unique way of doing everything, and he's also just like really fun. He's very great at making the team. He's like a very powerful glue that holds the team together, and that's why I think he's done so well as captain for so many years. He gets the team really hyped up every single round. Before we go to once we've gotten our pairings and we're on the way to our tables, we do like, team huddles where we're all like get together, get each other hyped up to kick some ass, and then just like do a big USA or whatever. A lot of the teams did things like that. And John would always give like the best pre-battle speeches. And like, I could tell everyone on the team was just like getting fired up to go kick some ass. So like he does a great job at making everyone feel like, we're in this together. No matter what happens, like if you make mistakes during a game, if you slip up, it's all good. Like, we all understand each other. We're all accepting of that kind of stuff. Let's just go like play our best game, have some fun, and we got this. So he is amazing at that, and I very much respect him for all the amazing work he's been doing as captain. He does a great job at that kind of thing.
Yeah, awesome. So, Nick, anything else you want to add other than having to learn about interpretive dance, literally and figuratively? Like,
yeah, I didn't really notice any of that, but what I appreciate about Sean was that he isn't like super serious 100% of the time. He was a very good job at letting people breathe, like letting people. He's like, I know that these are the roles you guys have like stepped up to the plate for, or like the roles that I've like the reason why you guys are like in the positions you're in, and he trusts people to like fulfill the roles that they've stepped up to do. He's very funny. He's very goofy. That's something that I appreciate a lot. Like in our 40K community is how we can go from being funny and goofy and then being like, okay, like let's try to win. And so he does a good job at that. And when the team gets unfocused, he does a good job at being like, hey guys, it's time to refocus. Like I recognize we need to do this, and getting like serious captain mode. So yeah, I think it's a really good balance. And I mean, yeah, I felt like a valuable member of the team. I felt like I was like trusted to do what I needed to do, and that was great.
Yeah, so what was it that you had to do, Nick? So obviously you went over as one of the coaching staff, an assistant per se. Like, what did you do, like round to round? What was it that you were entitled to do while Lucas was putting boys in trucks and boys and going all the way around? What was your role?
Yeah. So I know America had a lot of coaches this year. Most teams usually have like one or two. I think we had like 5 or 6. So we didn't want it to be too overbearing. Like we didn't want to be like too many cooks in the kitchen. So we had 2 coaches that were mostly in charge of like, these are the 2 guys, like Steven and Quentin, who have the clipboards. They're the ones keeping track of the round scores. They're the ones who's reporting like the information to Sean, who will then report back to them on if our players need to adapt or not. So our role was a lot more like hands off. Like because we were really trying to just let the players breathe, right? Like we don't want to get involved in their game. We just kind of want to observe. And when players need something, we're there to help with them. So it's basically like if someone needed to get information to like Steven or Quentin and they couldn't find them, they just wave us over real quick. They would also, I think like with how hot the event hall was, people would kind of get sucked into their games. Everyone who's playing is a very serious 40K player. So people would often forget to like drink water or like, eat, that sort of thing. So we were in charge of making sure that like, Lucas didn't collapse at the table and that sort of thing.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And other ones too, like for myself and Tyler and like other faction specialists, like Lucas was talking about, Steven would be like, I really don't know what a GSC board state looks like. Tyler, watch that game and like come report to me if it looks like it's going well or poorly. And like the same thing with me with Necrons. They'd be like, let us know how that is. Because the big thing at WTC is when you ask questions to people at the table, the other person at the table, like the opponent, has to be able to hear. So sometimes if you walk over and you're like, hey, dude, are you smashing this person? Like, and then you go, yeah, that player might adjust their playstyle being like, oh, wait, I'm losing, because they might not know that they're about to like walk into a trap. So it's very valuable to just look at a board state and be able to tell the coach, like, this is how it's going without having to interrupt the game. So it's pretty much what we did as coaches.
That sounds cool. And like, it's an important job for sure. And like, for being the food delivery service as well, is a more than established title. So I know the Australian team last year had like Mick Delivery for Josh McMillan, and there was like Ben U Log, so like a bunch of like DoorDash equivalent sort of thing. So yeah, look, got to get some food and sustenance in you, and make sure Lucas doesn't die. That's a minimum requirements. Minimum requirements is what we need. So, Lucas, handing over to you. So obviously during the event, so obviously you guys ended up in second, but along the way you guys had some draws. And for people who don't know, USA last year had a draw into Australia, and it was almost like a bit downhill from there. Like sort of lost a lot of team morale and a lot of momentum moving forward. So what did you guys try and do differently for these draws? Obviously, I know you weren't there last year, but like, was there a general sentiment about what to do if a draw was to occur, and how you guys recouped and regathered your thoughts? Like starting with England, then Poland.
Yeah,
Poland and England. Sorry.
All right. Yeah. So our first draw was, in round 4 we had a very narrow win into Germany, and that was kind of our, we knew that was going to be a very challenging round, but that was the true wake up call of like, okay, every round from now on is going to be very serious. We need to be like fully present and like, we need to try very hard in every single one of these games. And then we had a draw into Poland and a draw into England. So mentality wise, after those games, I can't speak for the others on the team. I'm sorry, rogue earbud. I can't speak for others on the team. Me personally, having basically no teams experience and no experience on Team USA, I took those as victories. I'm like, you know what? We tied like the best team in the world, Poland, and then we tied one of the best teams in the world, England. Those sound like victories to me, and draws don't put you out of the running in the WTC. It just means you need to redouble your efforts in the next round. So we took those as like, we put up a prospective result. We fought tooth and nail against, this team, one of the best teams in the world, and we took them to a draw. Let's go crush the next team next round. So maybe some others on the team had a different perspective. I know some people can sometimes get bummed out when you don't win every round. But for me anyway, it was like, okay, we are at least a match for everyone here if we're able to tie Poland. So let's redouble our efforts in the morning.
Yeah, that's completely fair. And it's great you guys were able to overcome that and keep momentum going strong. So, but during the event, Lucas, so like 2 games I sort of wanted to highlight. So people who are unaware, so obviously Pumba for Team Poland. So he was a captain this year. The guys won the event, and he's sort of been around on the podcast scene a bit, like Contact Lost and various guest appearances and other things, as well as the ever-soothing voice of Vic Vijay for 40k Fireside. So I know you had the pleasure of playing both of them, those T-Suns experts. So other than, I'm sure, being seduced by Vic Vijay and his soothing voice and maybe a free dental checkup, like what was that experience like?
Yeah, man, that's why I got 3 points. I was just so distracted by his dulcet tones. Anyway, yeah, so the if you want a little bit more of a breakdown on this, by the way, shameless plug, on the TNG podcast, we do break down kind of how I went from a relatively crushing win against Pumbaa in round 5 in the Thousand Suns into playing against basically the same list the next round and getting a measly 3 points. So if you want like kind of a little more information about how that happened, make sure to check out our podcast. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Played against Pumbaa on stream. He was an absolute gentleman and an amazing person to play against. Also, I have to give him credit, he is one of the most resilient 40k players I've ever played against. With how I went first, and B, like there was many moments of just like I got some ridiculous dice luck over the course of the game, and he just like stayed completely level-headed the whole game, like was super calm and friendly and jovial the whole time, even with like these ridiculous dice swings, and it just overall made the game super fun and enjoyable for me to play. So big props to him there. Was really fun also, like I said, with his resilience, watching him turn a bad situation into, I'm just gonna, I might have expected to get 6 points. Now I'm going to reset my expectations, expect to get 4 points, and just make sure I lock down those points. And he did an amazing job of that. I very easily, Adam and Joe over the course of the game were saying, it looks like Lucas is locked up at 20 or at least an 18. Like he's going to blow Pumbaa out here. And Pumbaa did a really good job to just make sure a bad situation didn't get turned any worse. So that was really fun. Pumbaa was an absolute gent to play against, probably one of my favorite games of 40k I've ever played. And then immediately the next morning I play against Vic, and also have one of my favorite games of 40k I ever played. Was definitely a lot of fun. Yeah, it was such a different game, even though it was more or less the same list. Was a lot of fun to see kind of 2 sides of the same coin, and also see that Thousand Suns. In America, I'm used to seeing the 10 Terminator Thousand Suns list, and seeing that more rubric heavy list played to such an quality extent that Vic played it as was just so cool, and really got me excited about Thousand Suns. So yeah, that was an absolutely amazing game. Vic was a gentleman, and even as he destroyed me, he was being a gentleman. So it was a lot of fun to see all the tricks that T-Suns have up their sleeve. Yeah,
between the jazz tunes and his sultry tones, like you got a good game of 40k as well in there.
Absolutely, all 3.
Absolutely, woohoo! So obviously the WTC also has a big social element. So I know it was a bar popular in Mechelen, was like frequented every night by many countries and many people. So, but was there any fun? So handing over to you, Nick, first. Was there any fun stories you wanted to share about the experience that you got to experience, whether at bar popular or elsewise? Hopefully you didn't end up in a canal or a river. I mean, allegedly, but
no. Luckily, there wasn't any late night swimming for me or anything like that. We were only able to go out like the first night before WTC started and the last night after it ended, because every other night we were busy kind of meeting up and doing pairings meetings. But it was really fun the first night, getting to put a lot of like faces to names, like meeting a lot of these people that I'd played like scrimmages with. Someone who I'm a big fan of is Cattle from Northern Ireland, their team captain. He's just a big bundle of joy. And then meeting the people during the tournament, and then that last night, kind of everyone coming together. I remember we went and ate dinner as a team, and then some of us who wanted to went over to Bar Popular. The one bar open apparently past like 11 p.m. in all of Mechelen. And it was really cool when like the different teams showed up, like the Polish team all showed up together, and everyone like kind of cheered and applauded for them. So it was cool to see like the whole 40k community, like, all right, WTC's over. We're all going to come together. We're all going to have some drinks, and we're all going to like hang out together. In the last round against Team Sweden, like Lucas was saying, even though we'd drawn twice, we knew that like we could still win the tournament, like depending on what happened in the England-Poland game. And so we were like, we need to like smash this game with Sweden out of the park. And even though like they both like they knew that too, they were like, USA is going to come in swinging because they want to try to win this tournament. We had an absolute great game with us. They were probably like our most fun round. Everyone at every table was like laughing and joking with each other. And I mean, myself and the Swedish coaches, they are going around and sharing this absolutely terrible alcohol with everyone and taking shots of it. So I partook in that with them, and it was a good time.
What was it like? Or at least what was it? Surströmming? Is that fish that goes under sea and so it smells like
I
shit?
don't know. It had
Yeah.
like no taste, but it basically just like left this, I don't know, alcohol-y
Shit. It was just,
feeling in your afterwards for like an hour.
As
And they were
I'm
laughing
setting
all of us as we drank
as
it.
I'm setting up my game against Olaf, I look over and see the Swedish coaches offering a shot of the stuff to Jaime and did he play JSJ? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he played JSJ. Anyway, they both have a shot of this stuff, and Jaime throws it back, and then he just like he looks down at the bottle and he just goes, and like just makes the most disgusting face ever, and I'm like, oh god, they're about to have some fun. So it was very funny to see.
There's a video out there on Discord, which I'm sure people could find if you really are curious what this whole Team Sweden thing. I think it's actually in Tweet Sweden's 40K's Facebook page, so you can find it there. So so after the event, so obviously USA came second. Really great, amazing achievement, and it was obviously I think it was a good achievement for you guys, and I'm sure you guys were happy. You aren't all sad on screen, or the post-event recap hasn't been all sad. So handing over to Lucas first. So what are your key takeaways from you attending the WTC for the first time, and like what did you find was different from expectations, and what are you looking to try and attend next year, maybe?
Yeah, to answer the last question first, I'm definitely hoping to reattend next year. It would be super fun. Where we've got a different kind of process for selecting the 8 starters next year. It's kind of like USA internal stuff, so I won't give it away. But it should be a lot of fun, and I've got a decent chance of being another starter. So which I'm definitely going to shoot for. Overall takeaways, it was an absolute blast, a ton of fun. It's definitely an entirely different vibe. I mean, like I definitely felt like I was playing 40K over there, but just the extent to which there's like team camaraderie and also just like WTC camaraderie. Like we were all super excited that USA came in second, like both Team USA and everyone else there. And then also we were all excited that Poland won, like everyone cheered for them. It was super sick. Just that feeling of like everyone's in this together, like we all understand what's at stake and we all just want to have like the best games and rounds possible was just super fun and cathartic after, like the stress of traveling to like arrive and be like, this tournament was everything I hoped it was going to be and more. It was super, super cool. No real negatives to speak of. I mean, everything was just an absolute blast and I can't wait to hopefully go back next year. In terms of like Team USA stuff, I think our the reforms that we did over the course of the last year worked really well. The prospect system, having a larger pool of talent to draw from, and also even though some of that talent wasn't actually on the starting roster, just having them around to give their advice, give their thoughts, help out, provide assistance, all that kind of stuff was just absolutely wonderful and helped the starting team out a ton.
Yeah, awesome. How about yourself, Nick? Any big key takeaways? And can we see the Short King return back to Mechelen?
Yeah. I mean, as long as Lucas is going, I am much more incentivized to return. Having someone like who's also in the same region who you want to like practice with and get excited about at the same time makes it a lot easier to focus on. I definitely want to try it again next year. There's definitely like a huge time commitment. And it starts to ramp up in the spring. And now that I kind of understand, like, this is the level of preparation that we need and more to get the results that we're hoping for, it makes a lot more sense to me, like how to like budget that time accordingly, how to plan ahead for that. So I'm someone who, after doing something once, it like, really clicks in my head for the next time and just kind of look to try to improve on it for the future. So after like going there and kind of the stress of traveling to Europe for the first time and seeing how the event is and kind of like letting that like realization sink in, I feel a lot more prepared for next year. And I think that I'll be able to like come in a lot more confidently with being like, all right, a lot of these unanswered questions have now been answered. Now I can just focus solely on preparing to play 40K at the tournament.
Yeah, sure. So, has WTC taken your heart, like a European, a significant other or someone that you love? Like, do you love the teams format and the WTC terrain stuff like that, or are you still an FLG singles man at heart on place terrain for the future?
As far as the terrain goes, yeah, absolutely fixed terrain formats are the way of the future. It in the past, I mean, fixed terrain unfortunately was just not that good because like TOs, it was super unstructured. It was super there wasn't any communication going on. So from tournament to tournament, you'd just be showing up to random tables, and no one really understood like what a good table was. So now that we have like these organizations, like honestly, the new GW layouts are great too, and being able to play like consistent games across like similar terrain formats designed by people who know how to make good boards. Like that's just the way of the future, and I don't want to go back to the the land before that at all, or the time before that at all. And then as far as teams events goes, I know that there's some rumblings about teams events happening in the US. There's a lot of people getting more excited about it. There's a lot more coverage that happened this year from the US thanks to Joe War Games Live. So we're hoping that there will be some like 8-man teams tournaments coming up this year in the US. And I know Lukas and I have already started talking to some of our local friends, trying to build our best 8-man team. And we had an absolute blast at that 5-man teams, not Turkey Wars, Brood Wars back in June. So I'm so much more excited about adding, 3 more friends to that group and traveling down somewhere and hopefully, showing them what the PNW is all about.
Hell yeah. So, Lucas, do you share a similar sentiment? Are you a WTC boy now, or are you still an FLG singles man?
I mean, I can never completely turn my back on singles. I think singles is really fun. It's two different sides of the same coin, right? Like I enjoy singles for what it is. I understand that there's some things that are less desirable about it, and I also understand teams for what it is. I so far have not found anything to be not desirable about teams other than maybe the feeling of coming back to your team with a score less than what you had predicted. That's like the only downside, which I definitely didn't do that this year. Definitely not. But yeah, I love teams. I love singles. I'm going to keep doing both. I have definitely not, I would say, teams is definitely has more taken my heart at this point, but I'm definitely going to be continuing to do both.
More than fair, more than fair. And Nic, you touched on there before. So, what does the future for team events look like in the USA? I know the American Team Championships at ATC had a recent announcement. If you want to maybe elaborate further, but like, what does it look like? Is it just, as you said, gathering a bunch of people through friends and trying to attend some events, or is there something different?
Yeah, I don't know like too much of the specifics, unfortunately, because we're not organizing any of them. I just know that there are some people out there who have a lot of power in organizing events and a lot of connections and like renting out spaces. And like within our Team USA Discord, there's been a few people that are like, we're really excited about this and we really want to get this going. So like keep your ears and eyes open. Within our local community, we kind of were big Kickstarters of trying to get the 5-man teams event going, and it sounds like that's going to be an annual thing, which is super exciting. I know 5s is different than 8s, but it's a good start. And a lot of people locally, it seems, have gotten very excited about teams, especially being able to follow Lucas's journey at the WTC and like being able to watch him on stream. So locally, we know we have like the ears of the TOs. We're good friends with many of them. So we're hoping maybe to get a few more teams events up here. Maybe like 2 a year would be hype. So yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, well, the secret 40k TO cabal have to work themselves out and go from there. And then look, so for people who have not heard of TNG podcast, other than Lucas being an influencer, yes, you're an influencer now for people and an inspiring change in team events. What could people listen to and expect from the the TNG podcast?
Yeah, so TNG is part of the Best in Faction network, and we kind of our podcast is all about kind of our journey narratively, following us, since we're still kind of new in the competitive scene relatively to lots of other folks, following our journey both in terms of like tournaments, growing our armies, growing our skill repertoire, growing our hobby collections, all that kind of stuff, and just following along. So we do a lot of things like tournament recaps are most of what we do, but we'll also like do faction highlights, tactics related things. So really just the full gamut of competitive 40K content. And we'd like to think it's a good time, and we would be really appreciative if you'd come check us out. So yeah, if that sounds appealing to you, again, our channel is The Best in Faction Next Generation.
I've got a link to the podcast and like play session in the description down below. So you don't even have to click that far. So it's nice and easy. And I can definitely advocate the podcast is great. So for people who just want to listen about the, I guess, tabletop experience and like go round by round, game by game, and look, yes, even though the US meta is okay and soft, maybe in some extent, in the Pacific Northwest
it's definitely the weakest region. Just absolute garbage.
Look, they actually have some quality. That sounds bad. They do have some amazing content and some great reviews. So, Nick, you want to add on something there?
Yeah. TNG. I mean, the big thing is just kind of our like journey as competitive players. I mean, we've gone from starting off to joining Team USA, so I think it's going pretty well. And there's some excitement of a break there as we were all preparing for WTC, but you all can definitely look forward to when like the September balance patch comes out, us kind of talking about like what 40K looks like in this new world, and about all the tournaments we're going to be going to this fall and winter. So
yeah, happy days. So any final plugs or shout outs you want to allude to? So I know obviously Charity Hammers on the horizon for Best of Faction. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. There is a big event coming up in a few weeks, Charity Hammer. So this is kind of the, I guess, brainchild of Colin Sherman. It is a charity event that is looking to raise money for Child's Play. It is an organization where it's like children with cancer, and they're just kind of raising money for like toys and other such things to kind of help make things a little bit happier for, children diagnosed with cancer. So this event has been going on for a few years. I believe this year it is on September 14th to 17th. You correct me if I'm wrong, Lucas. But it's going to be 4 days of 40K streaming. I've never been myself, so Lucas could probably talk a little bit more about it, but it's supposed to be 24 hours of playing and streaming. There will be a 32-person GT there. There's also supposed to be rumblings of a 1-round 8-man team tournament. So look forward to that. Anything else you want to talk about Charity Hammer, Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, just one correction. It's not 24 hours. It is 72 hours of straight streaming. So it is multiple days in a row of just nonstop streams. And there's all sorts of games in there. There's just like people throwing ridiculous list ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. There's just like meme games essentially, but there's also, everyone comes and plays a GT, and at the end of that GT, we'll probably have someone versus John Lennon, and you'll get to watch a really quality game on stream. That 8v8 teams is also going to be really fun. So if you want to, if you would enjoy watching the Zoomer crowd beat the crap out of BiffBot OG, then that can definitely be something that you can see on stream.
That's what I want to see. Just young people beating up the old. That's more than safe. Putting them back in their nursing homes. So that's great.
For charity.
For charity. As long as it's for charity. When it's an actual domestic abuse, then maybe not the best thing. But for charity, it's fine. For kids. Absolutely. And yeah, absolutely echo. Like donating to Child's Play is amazing. So any help they can get is fantastic. And look, as well, you may receive a lucky door prize or a raffle prize along the way. So look, I have received a Lehman Russ battle tank from it in the past. Look, I never received it, but that's another side point. But that's just because of USA international shipping. But that's okay. That's okay. So no, I really, really appreciate you guys joining the podcast and giving a nice deep dive on Team USA and all your rumblings at the WTC. And look forward to future episodes about discussing it. So yeah, really, really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening and joining. Hope you learned something along the way, and definitely echo the sentiment of just follow these guys and support content creators like us. So thank you very much and have a good one. Take care, guys.